Hari Om. Om Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryandam Vande Guru Parambaram. Prajnanam Shipradane Sthirajara Nigaravyaabhivirvyapya Logan Bhuktva Bhogan Stavishtan Punarabhidishanodbhasidan Kamajanyan Vitva Sarvan Visheshan Swapati Madhurabhum Maya Bhojan Maya Sankhyaturiyam Paramamurdamajam Brahmayatannadosmi Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhanaktu Sahaviryam Karavavagai Tejasvinavadhidamastu ma Vidyushavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. See, the whole purpose of learning, when I say the learning, Paravidya or the Arjanam of Paravidya, when I say the Arjana, learning. Paravidya is all about the knowledge that one realizes in life about the truth within us, the reality within us. And that true self, because the subject matter is about the self, that true self doesn't change. Whereas our sense of identity is continuously changing. If you observe the so-called possessions, the so-called identities that we have or that we created in life or that we are continuously creating in the life is changing. The sense of identity is always changing. But whereas the true self, the one who is witnessing the changes, cannot change. If the witness is also changing, then it is something like an aeroplane which is trying to do a takeoff on a moving object. The runway, which is stable, has to be there for an aircraft to gain speed and do a takeoff. Similarly, in us, there is a changeless true self. Whereas our identities are keep on changing because we ourselves identify with different things, so called as the possessions, so called as the so and so of this person, or we associate ourselves with different space, time, objects, different objects that are having the coordinates of space, time and causation. So now, for all the creations, when we say the creations, including our own body, the self is ever existing. There is not even a time where the self is absent. There is not even a time that self also has drifted. So all the creations, including our thoughts, our ideas, our beliefs, our so-called body, mind, intellect, everything, all are the projections in that consciousness, which is not changing. And if you see, we always appreciate different things that we see around us. We can see a lot of things. We call it as multiplicity of things. And we feel that this multiplicity is the reality because there is also a common kind of saying that, seeing is believing. So what is happening is we are persisting the fantasy of multiplicity in life. So the issue is not just seeing the multiplicity, is not about using the multiplicity in life. The issue is basically we identify ourselves with the persisting fantasy of the multiplicity. And the problem is basically these multiplicities will come, they would come and they would also go away. And the only way to appreciate that multiplicity is, now we need to ask the question, what is the reality behind all this multiplicity? Is there a common reality? Is there a common thread behind the reality of the multiplicity? When we start looking into that, we will understand that the multiplicities by themselves don't have any independent existence. These names and forms, these objects, with the help of the so-called isness, exist. If that isness is not there, then there is no meaning for the names and forms. So all phenomenal appearances, we say whether they appear or disappear, in this self, everything appear or disappear in this self, or so-called as the consciousness. And this consciousness is appearing in the form of being. This consciousness is appearing in the form of awareness. This consciousness is appearing in the form of happiness, in the form of being, in the form of awareness, in the form of happiness. And this being is, in a simple way we can say, it's the isness. For anything, for any object to exist, there needs to be the beingness, the isness. The flower is existing. My body is existing. It is existing in what? It is existing in the reality. It is existing in the self. So now what is happening is, we have drifted from that self. We have drifted from the subject, and now we are now persisting the multiplicities, persisting the fantasies of multiplicities. What is happening is, we ourselves have lost our true self. In a Vedantic term, we can say this as the Swarupa Vismriti. Swarupa Vismriti. Vismriti meaning the forgetfulness. Swarupam is what? Swarupam is our own true nature, the true reality, the true self. Forgetting that true self. This is, in simple Vedantic terms, Swarupa Vismriti is called as Ajnanam, is called as ignorance. Forgetting about our true self is the only problem. It's not like the self is not existing. There is not even a time where you are without that self. The only problem is the drift. Drift has happened. Drift happened due to what? Drift happened due to the influence of the multiplicity that we are dealing in our day-to-day life. So now what one has to do is basically center to that self. Centering to that self. That is the only thing which is needed. And that self, as you know, as we all know, that is called as the Swayam Prabha. the light of the lights, Jyotirajyoti, Swayam Prabha. So the drift has happened, and now what we have to do is, through the blessings, we have to center ourselves to that self. So that only will bring meaning in our life. All objects we need to transact, no doubt. Appreciate the objects, appreciate the plurality, appreciate the multiplicity of the world, but know the reality behind the objects. Those objects cannot have an independent existence. There needs to be the reality behind the names and forms. And your reality is also the same. It is the same. It is the one and the same. So there cannot be a different reality for our own existence as well as the existence of the universe. The reality cannot be different. That subject is not an object because it cannot be objectified. So that subject is the common reality. Bhagavan says in Gita, Smatta Paradaram Nanyat Kinjidasti Dhananjaya Mai Sarvavidam Prodam Sutre Manigana Iva. I am the common link. I am the continuous link. When you say common, please understand it is ever pervading. It is the continuous link between the diversity of the objects, including our own existence, our own body, our own possessions. That consciousness is the link, and that consciousness is one and the same. It is the only one reality that is pervading everywhere. And that reality we can witness through the analogy of the avastatrayam in us, which is happening on a daily basis. Jagrata avastha, Swapna avastha, and the Sushupti avastha. The awakened state, the dreaming state, and the deep sleep state. So, in the awakened state, every indriya is active, the world is active, you are having interactions with the world. In the dream state, the mind is having projections on some of the dominant ideas or beliefs that we are inheriting from the Jagrata Avastha, based on our vasanas, based on the interactions that we have in our Jagrata Avastha, the projections happening in the mind, where the consciousness of the body is not there. Because we, in Swapnam, we drop all those possessions, even the body feeling, right? Probably you witness yourself as a poor man or a millionaire there. So the wealth or the possessions, all those things are not relevant there. Only the projections of the mind is just happening based on certain influences. In that also, you, the self, is there. And you are the one who is having a dream. And when we go to the Dirgha Sushupti, the Nidra, the Sushupti Avastha, the dream state, everything gets dropped there, including all the faculties, mind, body, intellect, everything, the relationships, the possessions, everything gets dropped. What is happening there? In that state, we experience the completeness or fulfillment. So this single consciousness is maintaining the three avasthas. There was not a state like in the Jagrata Avastha, the consciousness is absent. In the Swapna Avastha, no. In all the three avasthas, this consciousness is the dominant factor. It is the continuous link. And it is a single consciousness There is not even a time that you feel that this I has changed. See, there is not even a state like you feel that I was lost. You are able to continuously connect all the experiences 20 years back or 30 years back or whatever you can recollect. You have not changed. Changes happened in the body, changes happen in the mind. You are the symbolism of eternity. You are the consciousness. You are unlimited. You are free. There is no restrictions that you can impose. There are no limitations that you can impose of any kind, because you, the self, the truth is consciousness. It is unlimited, and by the nature itself, consciousness, the reality is existence, consciousness, absolute. So the more we are free, that is what is happening. In the deep sleep, what is happening? We are free. We are also happy. Can one deny that? So this self is the embodiment of supreme bliss. The self is the embodiment of the supreme bliss. And the self is the embodiment of the manifestations that you can see. When you say the plurality or multiplicity, the self itself is the proof of the manifestations that you can see, including this manifested body. So now the question will be asked, like, why I am not experiencing the bliss? So though we appreciate that existence and consciousness, right? Because for you to see, for you to look around, you need to exist. You need to be aware. You need to be conscious. And one side we say the Brahman is Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma. Existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute. Why that bliss is not happening? When we say in the deep sleep, we are in that bliss. Though ignorance is prevailing, but we are in that bliss. Because we, without anything, in the absence of objects, when subject alone is there, you are with that subject, the extreme happiness is experienced there. So what the issue is, basically our gunas are playing a role here. And you say the guna, the rajasic and tamasic gunas of man prevents the manifestation of bliss. In fact, what happens is basically the influence of these two gunas hide one to go to the state of bliss or the Paramananda. But whereas the sattvam and the rajas and tamas will still allow the manifestation of, or to experience the consciousness and the existence of the manifestations. That includes, yeah, I exist. I exist in this body as a consciousness or as an existence. We are able to appreciate that. But the problem is basically the influence of tamoguna and the rajoguna will not allow one to experience the third dimension, so called as the bliss, in this manifested body. It is the influence of the rajogunam and the tamogunam. So for one to experience that bliss, that is where sattvam plays the role. Sattvam is all about samshuddhi. The sattvic nature is very much needed for experiencing that bliss. Now the problem is basically the materialization has happened. The world is all about objects. So the influence of Rajoguna and Tamoguna are dominant in all of us. And the drift from the subject to object has happened in the form of ego, because we interact with the objects using the ego. And we now identify our true self as the small I called as the ego. Though our true nature is bliss. That is what Shruti says, I am Atma Brahma, Prajnanam Brahma, and you are that, Tattvamasi. So now what one has to do is, we need to have a kind of analysis and a logical investigation. And when the Mahavakyam says, Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma, you are that. Or I am Atma Brahma, or Tattvamasi. Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma, Yo Veda Nihidam Guhayam Parame Vyoman. Now we have to start looking into a logical investigation. Who am I? Who truly am I? So Brahman, by definition, because theoretically Mahavakyam or the Upadesham says that you are the Brahman. You, the Atma, is same as the Brahman. The absolute truth, the absolute knowledge, the absolute infinity. So now, through logical investigation, we will be able to understand that I, the true self, is trapped in this body-mind complex. This true self is under the clutch of the body, mind, sense, intellect complex. When Shruti says Atman and Brahman are inseparable, Tattvamasi, and they both constitute one reality, and that reality is existence, consciousness, bliss, then why I am not experiencing that bliss? This is the logical inquiry one has to do. So what one has to do is basically build the Devi Sambat in us, build the Sattva Gunam in us. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we have gone through the Deva Asura Sambat Vibhaga Yoga, the 24 traits which are needed. That is the only way to get the Sattva Samshuddhi. Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti. The word starts like that. Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti. Dhanam Dhamascha Yajnascha Swadhyayatapa Arjavam Ahimsa Satyam Akrodam Tyaga Shantirapaishunam Daya Bhudeshu Aloluptam Mardavam Hrira Chapalam Tejakshama Thridi Shaujam Adroho Nati Manita Bhavanti Sampadam Devim Abhijadasya Bharata. So that is the only way to increase the Sattva Gunam, and Tadwara Sattva Samshuddhir. So once we have this, the jnanam, the ignorance in the mind will go, and the knowledge in the mind will start happening. That is where Vedantam talks about manashuddhi, the purity of the mind. The purity of mind is all about creating the wise values, the virtues. So last time we stopped at verse number 42 of Atmabodha. Now today let us see the 43rd verse, and now let us try to relate the points that we discussed so far in the context of this verse, 43rd verse. Please take the 43rd verse of Atmabodha. Aruneneva bodhena purvam santamase hrute tata avir bhavedatma swayamevam shumaniva. So when the sun rises in the morning, what goes away when the sun rises? The darkness will go away, right? The destruction of the darkness happens when the sun rises at dawn. So Atman appears after the destruction of ignorance in the mind by the knowledge of Atman. As I mentioned, the Sattva Shuddhi will help us. In the same context, let us try to relate this with the sunrise. Have you observed the golden hue of the dawn when, or just before the sun rises? Maybe in Sanskrit or in Sanskrit it is called as the Arunodaya. Have you seen this? The kind of hue, the golden hue that appears just before the sunrise. We get the vision of the brilliant sun illuminating the world at the time of the Arunodaya. So when the Sattva Samshuddhi happens in us, we can say this is just like a golden hue of the dawn, the Aruna or the Arunodaya. We will start getting the vision of knowledge similar to the sun that is going to illuminate the world. In Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in 5th chapter, again we can see Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashidam atmana tesham adityavat jnanam prakashayati tatparam. So there is nothing that can be compared with jnanam. So jnanam can only destroy the ajnanam. So how the Atma is covered? Atma is covered with the ignorance of the mind. Only knowledge about the Atman can remove the ignorance in the mind. Tesham adityavat jnanam prakashayati tatparam. So one has to have the viveka buddhi, the discerning perception about the reality. See what happens. One side, we can also, we will be able to understand this. The Maya, when I say the Maya, the Namarupam, the Apara Prakriti of the Brahman, pushes the human mind to experience the universe with a set of coordinates. When I say set of coordinates, where the mind can comprehend by taking or by using the nature of mind, what happens is the Maya pushes our mind to experience the universe with the kind of coordinates where the mind will be able to appreciate or will be able to comprehend. But what one has to understand is the coordinates which our mind is at are not the right coordinates, because those coordinates give a different perception of the reality. That is what Maya does. You all might have heard about the story of a few blind people describing an elephant. Right, so one tries to touch the elephant, and through the trunk that person will say, yeah, this is something which is having a trunk. Someone will touch the leg, maybe one leg, 2 legs, 3 legs, 4 legs. So one can say this is an animal that has got 1 leg, 2 legs, 3 legs, 4 legs. One can also say, yeah, this is an animal which is having a kind of a tusk. Someone who is touching the tail will say, yeah, there is some small tail. Yeah, this is the feature of the animal. So ultimately, everybody is talking in bits and bytes, but nobody is talking holistically about the reality of the elephant. So similarly, in our mind there is a darkness, and that darkness is induced by the mind due to the geometry of the mind with the coordinate system where the Maya has put the mind. And what happens is, the darkness is caused due to the wrong coordinates and not understanding about our own reality. That is called as ignorance of the Atma. So what one has to do through the Sattva Samshuddhi, like in the Arunodayam, the Vritti Jnanam should happen. That Vritti Jnanam should get spread in our mind. So when the Vritti Jnanam comes to the mind, the darkness of ignorance is destroyed from the mind. That is what the verse is saying. Aruneneva bodhena purvam santamase kude tada avir bhavedatma soyamevam shumaniva. So when the sun rises, the darkness will disappear, and before the sun rise happens, the Arunodayam happening, we'll talk about that vibrancy and glory of the sun. Similarly, in us, through the Sattva Samshuddhi, the ajnanam in the mind will get destroyed. The darkness caused by the ignorance of Atma will go away from the mind, and the mind will realize that truth. That vritti-jnanam only can remove the darkness of ignorance. Verse number 44. Atma tu satadam praptopi apraptavad vidyaya apraptavad avidyaya tannashe praptavad bhati swakandabharanam yada. Atma tu satadam praptah abhi avidyaya apraptavat tannashe praptavat bhati swakandabharanam yada. So here, although the Atma is ever pervading, and that is the reality which is everywhere, but still due to the ignorance, that Atma is not realized. So how one will realize that? On the destruction of ignorance, only Atma can be realized. It is like the ornament that is always worn around our neck. When you say the ornament, let us understand that the missing ornament. Sometimes, you would be searching, oh, where did I keep? So ultimately you will understand that, yeah, it has not gone anywhere. I myself is wearing that. It is just like a missing ornament that's always worn around one's neck. So the Atman is ever present. There is not even a time that Atman is not there. There is not even a time that the self is absent. But because of the ignorance, that self is not realized. The only way is to destroy that ignorance. Then only the Atman can be realized. Atma tu satadam praptaha. It is our own true nature, already accomplished by all of us. We need to have the awareness of that infinite reality. That is what is missing. So the veiling of ignorance has to be removed. We need to be aware of this infinite reality. So that is the only way to remove the ignorance. Nirandara dhyana, nirandara, or the consistent connect with that reality is what is needed. The consistent remembrance of that reality. And that reality is the isness, is the awareness, is the existence, consciousness, bliss absolute. When one connects to that source, is the perfect example of practical divinization of our life. Verse number 45. Sthanau purushavat bhrantya krita brahmani jivata jivasya swatvike rupe tasmin drishte nivartate. So here the analogy used, sometimes out of vibranti or wrong notion, one may see the post, maybe the electric post, to appear as a ghost. Even the electric post is kind of a long rectangularish structure. Sometimes we superimpose hands and legs to that post with some shape, size, etc., and we assume that as a ghost. And what happens in our life is basically the Brahman, which is the ultimate reality of all of us. We superimpose those limitations in the form of a Jiva Atma. And why it happens? Due to the ignorance. We superimpose the unlimited Brahman as a limited Jiva due to the ignorance. And how one can realize that it is not a ghost, it is just a post, or how one can realize that I am the infinite existence, consciousness, bliss principle, I am the Brahman, when one removes the egocentric individuality and identify the real nature as the Brahman, which is Satyam Jnanam Anandam. Realize the true self as the existence, consciousness, bliss principle. Then the egocentric individuality will get fragmented. And now one has to understand another aspect here. If you see the Jiva from the standpoint of Vedanta, we can say that we do have an Annamaya Kosham, we do have a physical body where we have the sense organs and organs of actions, five senses and five sense and five action organs, the physical body. Then the Pranamaya Kosham, the energy body, where we have the five prana acting, prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana. Then the Manomaya Kosham, the mental body, the faculty of mind, the manas as the reasoning faculty, and the ahankaram, the ego, as the I-ness. Then the Vijnanamaya Kosham, the body of knowledge, where the buddhi, the intellect, and the chitta, the memory. So what happens is basically we ourselves are getting caught up in these layers. Annamayam, Pranamayam, Manomayam, Vijnanamayam. We ourselves are getting caught up in this. And these, when you say caught up, we ourselves only created these things. And we are doing the adhyasam or adhyaropam or the superimposition into these different layers, Annamayam, Pranamayam, Manomayam, Vijnanamayam. So now we have to overcome this Pancha Kosham. When the ego sense ends, then there is no more bondage or suffering. So that is where one has to do the neti. Am I this body? Am I this mind? Am I this? Logically, we have to do the reasoning. Mano buddhya hankara chitta ninaham naja srotra jihve naja krana netre naja vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayu chidananta rupa shivoham shivoham. So that is where one has to do the contemplation, the logical reasoning, and understand that am I this body, mind, intellect, sense? Am I these organs of actions? Am I this manasa, chittam, buddhi, ahangaram? What is my true identity? Then one will understand that, yeah, I am doing the adhyaroma or adhyasam. So then why? How I can overcome? So that is where the sattva samshuddhi should happen. For the vritti jnanam to happen in the mind. With the blessings of that Lord, blessings of that higher nature, the higher reality. Verse number 46. Tattvaswarupanubhavad utpannam jnanamanjasa aham mamedi chajnanam badhade dig pramadivad. Tattvaswarupanubhavad. Ulpannam jnanam aham mama iti cha ajnanam dig brahmadivat anjasa badhade. So, out of the ignorance, I myself created the different notions so called as the I-ness or the mindness. How that will get destroyed? That will get destroyed by the knowledge produced by the realization of the true nature. What is that? My true nature is that reality which is not changing. Just as the sun removes the wrong notions about the right directions to follow. For example, in the night you are trying to travel and you are lost. When the sun comes into picture, when the sun rises, one will be able to identify which is east, west, north, south. So the wrong directions that you were following will get into the right directions to be followed when the sun rises. Similarly, the ignorance created by the notions of I and mine will get destroyed by the knowledge produced by the realization of the true nature. And we are that reality. One has to have this realization. So the self-knowledge which is born out of the experience of the reality. This has to be experienced. Experience of the reality immediately and instantaneously will only destroy the ajnanam or ignorance, which was caused due to the wrong notions created by the ego. And these wrong notions, you all know that these wrong notions will be limited, these wrong notions will be colored, these wrong notions will be distorted. These wrong notions are created every now and then, often they are created. With what? With a sense of actions or with the sense of I-ness or my-ness, so called as the sense of possession. So these are the perceptions created in the mind in the form of coloring, in the form of distortions, in the form of agencies of actions, in the form of sense of possessions. So the sun which rises can help us to locate the right direction. Similarly, the knowledge about the self can only lead us to the right direction, so called as the self-realization. So when that happens, the sense of ego, the sense of I, and the concept of mind will become meaningless, and one will also understand that they are delusory, and the meaning is beyond the sense of I, the concept of mind, or all those delusions. I am the reality which is not changing, which is giving, which is enabling the mind, body, sense, etc. to act. I am the reality which is giving sense to everything. And I am not the ego, I am not the mindness, I am not something which is deluded. This clarity has to happen. A right understanding only gives us the true direction. Verse number 47. Samyak vijnanavan yogi swatmanyevakhilam jagat ekam cha sarvamatmanam ikshade jnana chakshusha. Very profound. Talks about yogi and the jnana chakshus. Samyak vijnanavan yogi. Who is a yogi? Samyak vijnanavan. The one who has got a right understanding is a yogi. And that yogi is gifted with the complete illumination. And that yogi operates through the eye of discernment, so called as the Viveka Buddhi. And that Viveka Buddhi or the discernment is all about what? The totality of the universe in his own self, and considers things as a whole and as one at the same time. This is the eye of wisdom. This is the jnana chakshus. So what yogi understands is the enlivening factor is the true self. And that enlivening factor for the yogi, for that person, for the world outside, and for his different experiences, the enlivening factor is same. There the yogi sees the oneness of the gold ornaments. Though you can appreciate different gold ornaments, ultimately the yogi understands the oneness of the gold ornaments as the gold. So the reality alone is perceived to be the all-pervading, within, outside, here, there, everywhere. That's where the Upanishad also says that Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam. So a yogi is the one who has got Samyak Jnanam. And yogi also has got the realization of the enlivening factor, so called as the true self, is the reason for the world, for him, and for all the different experiences. Isha Vasimidam Sarvam, or Atma Vasimidam Vishwam. Verse number 48. Atmai Vedam Jagat Sarvam Atma na anyat vidyate mrudo yadvat khadadini swatmanam sarvamikshate idam jagat sarvam Atma eva. So this entire tangible universe is verily the true self, the Atman. Nothing whatsoever other than the Atman exists. So you can see different pots and jars, etc. Right? But they all are the clay. Then there cannot be anything apart from the clay. So to this enlightened one, the yogi understands that self is the ever pervading enlivening factor. There is no separate existence for the pot or pan apart from the clay, or there is no separate existence for the waves in the ocean apart from the water which they are rising and going. So to the self alone is the reality that gives shape and life to the different namarupams, including the world that you see, including the body that you have. This is rightly understood by the man of wisdom, so called as the yogi. So the multiplicity is just a projection upon the eternal, infinite truth, and you are not different from that truth. Atme vedam jagat sarvam atma na anyad vidyate mrudo yadvat khadadini swatmanam sarvamikshate. So that self alone is the reality which is giving shape and life to everything, and you are that. Now unfortunately, due to different reasons, the stereotyping has happened. So one has to do the Nirandara Sravana Manana Dhyanam and ensure that the Sattva Shuddhi is promoted in all of us to know the reality which is within us as the Satyam Jnanam Ananda Brahma, the existence, consciousness, bliss absolute.